Hello, my name's Ben Skemmels. I'm a designer and front-end coder at Make Media. Today I'm going to show you a presentation I did a couple of weeks ago at an event called UX Camp Brighton. It's a presentation that kind of takes you through a case study of a project we've been working on recently and some new processes that we've been bringing together to deliver that project. So the title of this talk is Design Processes and Prototypes for Responsive Web Design. And at Make Media, we kind of steer towards making all of our designs responsive. I'll explain what responsive is in a minute. And we've found that we kind of need to approach our working methods in a slightly different way to make the delivery of the project a lot smoother for us and our clients. So I'm a graphic and web designer, as I kind of said, and I've been working for several years now across a variety of different clients, in-house roles, agency roles, and I've worked with a lot of different processes. And some of these processes kind of start to come into question when you take web design processes to be responsive. So what is responsive? Well, responsive web design, I'm sure a lot of you are aware of it. For those of you who aren't, it's where one website can change the layout of its content depending on what device it's viewed in or the size of the device it's viewed in. So you can have a slight rejig of layout as you look at it on a phone, or you look at it on a tablet, or you look at it in a laptop or your desktop monitor at home. So one website can work optimally in all these things. But it does create a little bit of a problem because historically in web design we've used things called wireframes to discuss content and layout. Now the problem is that when you make a website go responsive, these layouts can be multiplied by 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. So all of that documentation that you produced for a wireframe, suddenly you're going to multiply that out by 6 or 7 times, making it pretty inefficient and lengthy process for someone to have to do. It's going to end up with a lot of paperwork flying around, and it really doesn't kind of like cut to the chase and solve your issues. In fact, it probably creates more issues. So, and on this slide here, you can see that the small amount of wireframes that you would have done for one project is going to get multiplied out by hundreds. So yeah, it's pretty unmanageable. So we looked towards one approach of doing this. We did a little bit of reading up for people who are already kind of like trying to solve this issue. Prototypes have kind of been around for a while, and a lot of people have steered towards using them, but it looks like they're becoming a lot better method for resolving layout and design options for a responsive website in general. What we think about prototypes is that, first of all, unlike a wireframe, you can actually use it. It's a piece of code. It's a working website, so you're kind of closer to the end item. And also, because of this, then you can start to put in responsive coding techniques, so you can start to look at how your layout works responsively. They're also quite quick and easy to produce. We're working in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript all the time, so just to be able to knock these up is not too much of a problem. So it doesn't necessarily take an extra amount of work, even though you are looking at kind of a website at the end of it. We also feel that these prototypes should be really minimally styled in the same way that a wireframe is, so you shouldn't really be discussing sort of stylistic issues at this stage. And also, it's kind of still a bit of a playground, you know, it's a place to make errors. Even though we're using code, and most people will be looking to make code perfect, or because it's looking like it's on the screen, you know, it should be like a real finished item. Well, you're still working in a really kind of early stage of the work, so it's something that should be changed quickly and be used to suggest different options so that you can kind of get to the best option as quickly as possible. So it becomes kind of a throwaway item that you don't get precious about and that you can test lots of different methods out. Because of that, what you probably won't do is end up using the code to go forward into the final item. So one of the first steps, and there are a couple of different steps that you need to do really to kind of like help a responsive project go forward into prototyping. And the first step is kind of like a method that we've been using here for quite a while anyway. And it's standard sort of like user interfaces or layout sketching. But we did it slightly differently this time. So beforehand, we would have tried to sketch all of the different important content out into, say, a desktop layout. But well, now we've got to kind of consider what that content looks like on a phone, or it looks like on a tablet, and it looks like on a desktop. So again, you can see that's already starts to become quite a lengthy process. So what we did with the client, once we figured out all the important content for each page that was going to help the users resolve their journeys, we then started to be able to prioritize it and figure what we were going to put on there. So we started to work on it in a mobile first way, and as you can see, the quote here is by Luke Wroblewski, is that smaller screens force designers to focus on what's truly necessary to a service or product. And Luke Wroblewski is the guy who kind of brought about this idea of mobile first. And that quote really does hint on the fact that you can, on a mobile screen, you can really only put in what's essential because you don't have a lot of space. And this is how we approached this part of the project. So we sketched out the 3 devices, really large on a wall, and then started to put the piece of essential content into the mobile device first. That way the client can really kind of like see, one, how it has to be rejigged across the different devices when they start to sketch it into the different devices, so they get an idea of what responsive means. But also what it does mean is that you become very, very precious about the space you have and make sure that only the important information is entered on the screen and it's in the correct order. So it really helps you cut away all the extraneous stuff that you want. Now, when you start to get through to your sort of desktop layouts, you end up realising you've still got quite a lot of space left because you didn't put a lot of content in. Well, what's good about that is that only the essential stuff is in there. So you know you're not giving your users lots of various journeys or lots of options that could confuse them or distract away. But what you can do at that stage is start to look back at your next important stage, bits of information or content that you want to put in there to support other user journeys and start to drop them in and to kind of like beef out the desktop journey a little bit more if you so wanted to. We worked through a lot of the layouts in the mobile versions with the client and then went away and spent a day sketching them up and refining the user interfaces for each of those layouts. So we've gone through like 10 pages, and between us, between a user interface designer, between a UX guy, a front-end developer, we kind of went through and discussed the pros and cons in different layouts. So again, we're still sketching, we're going through things really, really quickly. And we worked out through about 60 or 70 sketches, we worked out the different layouts we were going to need for the 10 pages. So from that, we've kind of got an idea of what the site's going to look like, what things are going to be positioned on what pages. So now we're going to look about making the prototype. And again, we want to kind of like launch it really, really quickly. And we don't want to be spending a lot of time working on this. We just want to kind of get something in place so we can have discussions about it. Now, developers have been kind of using the same kind of sets of startup code for websites, for years now, and they'll have their own kind of like sets of best practices. Now, this has kind of evolved into a scenario where sort of really, really eminent coders, people at MIT, people at Twitter, are starting to put these best practice codes together and creating these things called frameworks, which are kind of documentable startup pieces of code which allow you to launch a website really quickly with all the things in place that are going to help future-proof it and provide responsivity and stuff like that as well. So frameworks are a set of commonly used startup code that can help you quickly build a website. They're fully documented as well, and as I said about documentation, what's great about this is that in a couple of days, every different team member you're working with can kind of get up to scratch and you can all play by those rules. And it's already in HTML, CSS and JavaScript, which is really good because they're the coding languages that we already work in. So with all those things put together, it can really help you to bring a website to life quite quickly. What's great also is that they include a lot of commonly used elements that you would find in on a website. So you've got a lot of different buttons, you've got navigations, you've got forms and tabs, those sort of things. You've got page layouts, you've got a grid structure in there that helps support those page layouts. You've got kind of templates of specific pages that you might want to use, popular pages that already exist. And all these are brought together with kind of like a really basic styling. And like wireframes are basically styled. You're not looking at adding a visual layer at this stage. You just want something in place to suggest that something's usable and allow you to carry out user testing and allow the client to really understand what they're looking at. However, some of the downsides of prototypes that we should bring up is that because they're so flexible, the code that's in place is pretty big. It allows a lot of people to do a lot of different things. So the code that you do end up with could be a little bit heavy, especially if you're going to take it into a mobile environment. So it's, again, another reason for us not wanting to take the prototype code through into the live code. Some of the elements are a little bit hard to customize, so you find yourself kind of accepting what they give you. So it can become a bit generic. So you need to make sure that when you come to the production code that you put in an extra effort to make it specific for the client and new, so it doesn't look like it's an off-the-shelf solution. So we started to look into various different frameworks and apps that were going to help us accelerate this project and bring this prototype to life quickly. So we looked at Bootstrap, which is made by the people at Twitter, and again it comes with all those things I've talked about. It comes with a great grid structure, it comes with really good default styling, it comes with some sort of like pre-coded pages and templates. All in all, it was kind of looking like a good option. So Bootstrap is something that's well worth looking into. We then looked at an application called Accelerators. Now this looked like it was going to be directed more towards UX designers and designers who don't really have coding experience, and it's kind of like a WYSIWYG tool for you to be able to create wireframes but then interactivity to them. So you could make an entire site in this. It could be quite a lengthy process, but you could do that. And it's great because it outputs HTML, CSS and JavaScript, so you could kind of like end up looking at integrating that into another prototype. But again, what it outputs is pretty chunky. It's not going to be something you want to put into a live website. But we looked at a little bit more. It was a bit expensive. It was a bit quirky to learn, and it certainly wasn't something that a developer who knows those languages was going to be keen to have to be forced to jump through the hoops that it would make you do. And it isn't responsive. So it wasn't an option that we wanted to look into. It wasn't going to deliver it quick enough. But we did think it was a really good tool for UX designers to work in isolation, and maybe they can kind of like work with the client and come up with an idea and get all the benefits from making a prototype that they can interact with, and then they can feed that back into a project without actually having to get the resources of a developer involved or a designer involved. So it kind of worked well on that level. Then we moved on to something we read up about, a website called Foundation by a company called Zerb. And it was very similar to Bootstrap, but it was pretty much, it was a framework that was made for creating prototypes. So it was starting to look like it was steering towards exactly what we wanted. And it came with a few more sort of user interface elements, and it came with a few more page layouts that looks like we were going to use, and it was also set up to be responsive, so it looked like it was ticking all the boxes. It was potentially a little bit easier, the learning curve, for designers with a bit of coding knowledge to get into, so for someone like me it was really, really good. And one of the little points as well, we didn't end up using it, but it has got some stencils that you can use in Omnigraph or Illustrator. So if you are doing wireframes, and this talks about getting away from wireframes, but if you have to, if you need to go back to that process for some clients, then you can use those stencils, and then your prototype and your documents, the paper documents that you produce, are going to kind of look the same. So you've got kind of this visual continuity, which is kind of a handy little thing. And the other thing we thought about doing was making it ourselves. We thought about coding it ourselves, and we started to look into some already existing kind of like options that are out there for mobile devices, or responsive patterns that exist for mobile devices, which are obviously going to work on your desktop as well. So we started to look around at what else was out there. And we found quite a lot of work by a bloke called Brad Frost, and he's done the project called This Is Responsive. And he's done a lot of work to gather together these different navigation patterns and layout patterns that are commonly used. And he's brought them together and applied like a little analysis of each of them to suggest where it's good to use each of them. And you can rip the code out of his website and just drop it straight into your project, but you're going to need a little bit more knowledge of HTML, CSS and JavaScript to make it work. It's not modular like the frameworks, and it's not documented like the frameworks, so you need to really be able to get behind the scenes to make this work. So we were comfortable in kind of looking and reviewing through the patterns and choosing the ones that we wanted to, but it might not work for absolutely everyone. So in the end, we decided to go with Foundation. Foundation was kind of like teed up well for the job, and what we did is we took the sketches and we married them together with Foundation's kind of like templates, and built our own templates out of it as well. And then we dropped in specific content from the client's current website, just so to make the whole prototype look a little bit more legible and make a little bit more sense. And we came out with a prototype. It took about 3 days to produce a 12-15 page fully working website that we could review with the client. And what's great about this is that, one, you can usability test the prototype, so you can take it out, it's got the content in place for you to do this, and you can quite easily and early check what's incorrect about all those design decisions that you made. And we spent a lot of time reviewing this with the client as well once we'd usability tested it, and we kind of spotted quite early on that the client had missed out a couple of key aspects in their briefing process. So, 10%, 20% into the timeline of the project, we're already starting to see stuff that we've missed out, and it's a lot better to find that stuff out that early on than it is to find it right at the end of the process, when you're starting to release a test site for them to review, which is the next time when you're going to actually see a website, a working version of the website, if you're using the old methods. And that's not a good time for you to be having conversations about the things that you've got to budget in and who said what and when during the contract stage. That's sort of part of it. So it really helped us kind of like get everything out into the screen that we knew we needed in the brief, and it helped us realise what we hadn't considered correctly or how better we wish to do that. And then it gives you the rest of the project timeline to kind of help polish it and move it on. So as a conclusion, we can kind of say that responsive web design is a kind of pragmatic and economical approach to modern web design. You can take one website and make it work across any device that is coming out. But that it does make traditional design methods of wireframing slightly unmanageable. That we found out that mobile first really helps us and our clients refocus on only the essential things that you should include on a website. And that if you can sketch these out really, really quickly, you can kind of start to bring these layouts of important information to life as quickly as possible. And then making a prototype using frameworks really helps you bring a design closer to its final form and allows you to have a look at the interactions, the functionality, and also, more importantly, the responsive layout. And that prototyping helped raise flaws and issues, things that weren't considered in the brief, really on in the project timeline, and helped us resolve those issues to release a better product. So thanks for your time for listening to me. If you